The Grand Hall of Harmony Prime buzzed with alien voices speaking in dozens of languages. Commander Zixara stood near the massive viewing windows, her dark blue exoskeleton gleaming under the station's artificial lights. At 8 feet tall with 4 arms and natural armor plating, she looked like she could tear through steel with her bare claws. Most beings in the galaxy gave her plenty of space, but not the human standing beside her. Marcus Chen adjusted his simple black suit and smiled at another group of diplomats who were staring at them. He was average height for a human with brown hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Next to his wife, he looked like a child standing next to a war machine. "They're talking about us again," Marcus said quietly, nodding toward a cluster of Zelthari officials. The lizard-like beings had been whispering and pointing for the past 10 minutes. Zixara's mandibles clicked, and what humans had learned was her version of a laugh. "They always talk about us. They cannot understand why the strongest warrior in the Valorian Empire married a soft human who studies old rocks." "I prefer xenoarchaeologist," Marcus said, still smiling. "And they're not just rocks. They're old rocks with interesting stories." Ambassador Kravik, a massive bear-like Ursani, approached their group. His thick fur was decorated with medals from various wars, and his small eyes held no warmth. "Commander Zixara, I trust your human is staying out of trouble? These peace talks are too important for complications." Marcus felt the familiar sting of being talked about like he wasn't there, but he had grown used to it over the 3 years since their marriage. Most aliens saw humans as the galaxy's newest and weakest species. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. They were just soft pink creatures who had barely learned to travel between stars. "My husband goes where I go," Zixara said, her voice carrying a warning edge. "He has as much right to be here as anyone." Kravik's ears flattened against his head. "Of course, Commander. I meant no offense. I simply worry about security. These terrorist attacks have everyone on edge." The attacks had started 3 days ago. Small explosions in empty corridors, computer viruses that lasted only minutes, strange signals that interfered with communications. Nothing serious enough to cancel the peace summit, but enough to make everyone nervous. "The attacks are coordinated," Zixara said. "Someone is testing our defenses, learning our patterns. When they strike for real, they will know exactly where to hit." "Your security teams are the best in the galaxy," Kravik said. "Surely they can handle a few troublemakers." Marcus watched the conversation with the same attention he used when studying ancient artifacts. Body language, tone of voice, the words people chose. They all told stories just like the objects he excavated. And right now, Kravik's story didn't match his words. The ambassador was nervous about something more than terrorist attacks. After Kravik left, Marcus and Zixara walked toward the museum section of the station. Marcus had been given permission to catalog some of the artifacts on display, while the diplomats argued about trade routes and border disputes. "You don't trust him," Marcus said as they entered the quieter corridors. "Kravik has always supported the old ways," Zixara replied. "He believes only strong species should rule the galaxy. He thinks humans, Palathai, and other weak races should serve the warrior species." Marcus nodded. He had heard similar opinions before, usually when people thought he couldn't understand their languages. What they didn't know was that he spoke 7 alien languages and could read 3 ancient scripts that most scholars thought were impossible to translate. The museum was nearly empty, except for a few researchers and security guards. Display cases lined the walls filled with weapons, art, and technology from across the galaxy. Marcus had his own small workstation set up in the corner, surrounded by tablets, scanners, and reference books. "I still don't understand why you spend so much time with dead civilizations," Zixara said, settling into a chair that creaked under her weight. "The living galaxy has enough mysteries." Marcus picked up a small metallic object covered in strange symbols. "Dead civilizations can't lie to you. They leave their truth behind in what they built, what they saved, what they threw away. Living people are much more complicated." He ran his scanner over the artifact, frowning at the readings. "This is interesting. The metal composition doesn't match any known alloy. And these symbols, I've seen something like them before." "Where?" "In some very old human artifacts. Pre-spaceflight era, but that's impossible. Humans never had contact with other species before we developed faster-than-light travel." Zixara leaned forward, her forearms folding in a gesture that meant she was listening carefully. "Impossible things sometimes turn out to be just things we don't understand yet." Before Marcus could reply, The lights flickered and an alarm started blaring. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the museum as automated voices announced a security breach in the diplomatic quarter. "Stay here," Zixara said, already moving toward the door. "Be careful," Marcus called after her. She paused and looked back. "I am always careful. That's why I'm still alive." Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with the artifacts and the sound of distant explosions. Marcus tried to focus on his work, but the attacks were getting closer. Through the viewing windows, he could see security ships racing between the station's modules. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than the previous incidents. He picked up the strange artifact again, studying the symbols more carefully. They definitely looked familiar, but from where? He pulled up his database of human historical records and started comparing patterns. The match made his blood run cold. The symbols were almost identical to markings found in a cave in Tibet, dating back over 10,000 years. But according to official records, those markings were just primitive art made by early humans. They couldn't possibly be connected to alien technology, unless the official records were wrong. Marcus sat back in his chair, his mind racing. What if humans weren't as new to the galaxy as everyone believed? What if there was something in humanity's past that had been forgotten or hidden? Another explosion shook the station, closer this time. Emergency teams ran past the museum entrance, shouting orders in various languages. Marcus could hear weapon fire in the distance. He looked down at the artifact in his hands. The metal felt warm against his skin, almost like it was reacting to his touch. For a moment he thought he saw the symbols glow faintly, but it must have been a trick of the emergency lighting. Whatever was happening to Harmony Prime, Marcus had a feeling it was connected to more than just terrorist attacks. Someone was looking for something, and they were willing to tear apart the most important peace summit in galactic history to find it. He carefully placed the artifact back in its case and started gathering his research. If Zixara was right about the attacks being coordinated, then nowhere on the station would be safe for long. But before he ran, he needed to understand what he had discovered. The symbols on the artifact seemed to pulse in the red emergency light, as if they were trying to tell him something important, something that might change everything he thought he knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. The attacks had stopped as suddenly as they began, leaving Harmony Prime scarred but still functioning. Marcus spent the next morning in the museum, trying to make sense of what he had discovered. The artifact with the strange symbols sat on his desk, surrounded by printouts and data tablets. Zixara returned just after dawn, her armor scratched and one of her secondary arms bandaged. She moved with the careful precision of someone who was hurt but trying not to show it. "How bad was it?" Marcus asked, setting down his scanner. 3 dead, 15 wounded. They hit the security center and the main communication array before disappearing into the maintenance tunnels. Zixara settled into her chair with a barely hidden wince. Professional work. They knew exactly where to strike and how long they had before reinforcements arrived. Marcus poured her a cup of the bitter Valorian tea she preferred. "Any idea who they were?" "The bodies we recovered had no identification, no DNA matches in any database. Their weapons were military grade, but from different manufacturers. Someone went to great trouble to hide their identity." She accepted the tea gratefully. "What about you? You look like you didn't sleep." Marcus gestured at the scattered research materials covering his desk. "I've been comparing these symbols to every database I can access. The connections I'm finding don't make sense." He pulled up a holographic display showing the artifact's markings alongside images from various archaeological sites. "Look at this. The same symbol patterns appear in ruins on 12 different worlds, all dating back to the same time period. But according to our history, none of these civilizations ever had contact with each other." Zixara studied the display with the tactical focus she usually reserved for battle plans. "How old are we talking about?" 50,000 years minimum. Maybe older. The problem is none of the major galactic species had developed space travel that long ago. The Valorians were still learning to use fire. The Zelthari were barely crawling out of their swamps. What about this unknown civilization? The one that left these symbols? Marcus brought up another display, this one showing a star map with highlighted systems. That's where it gets interesting. Every site with these symbols was abandoned suddenly, all at the same time. No signs of war, no natural disasters. Whoever built these places just left. Or were forced to leave, Zixara said quietly. Before Marcus could respond, the museum's security alert chimed. A group of officials was approaching, led by Ambassador Kravik. The massive Ursani's expression was darker than usual, and he was accompanied by two hegemony representatives Marcus didn't recognize. Dr. Chen, Kravik said, his voice carefully neutral. These are Generals Vorthak and Skila from the Hegemony Council. They're interested in your research. Marcus felt Zixara tense beside him. The Hegemony was a military alliance of the galaxy's most aggressive species. They claimed to support order and strength, but their definition of both usually involved suppressing anyone they considered weak. General Vorthak was a krill, his insectoid features sharp and predatory. His compound eyes reflected the museum's lights like black mirrors. Dr. Chen, we understand you've been studying some very old artifacts. It's my job, Marcus said carefully. I catalog and research items for the museum, of course, but some artifacts are too dangerous for civilian study. General Skila spoke with the hissing accent of her reptilian species. Items connected to the architects, for example. Marcus kept his expression neutral, but his heart rate spiked. The architects were considered myth by most scholars, ancient beings who supposedly ruled the galaxy before disappearing without explanation. No one had ever found proof they actually existed. I'm not familiar with that term, Marcus said. Vorthak's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. No, how curious, because our intelligence suggests otherwise. Zixara stood slowly, her forearms spreading in a posture that looked casual, but put her within striking distance of both generals. Is there a point to this conversation? My husband is conducting legitimate research under proper authorization. Of course, Commander, but surely you understand our concern. The recent attacks, the timing of this research. Some might see patterns. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. They were being accused of helping the terrorists. Are you suggesting I'm involved in the attacks? We're suggesting, Skila said, stepping closer, that certain artifacts might be better secured by those with the strength to handle them properly. The artifacts stay here, Zixara said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. This is neutral territory under treaty protection. Kravik shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we could reach some compromise. The Hegemony has excellent research facilities. No, Marcus said firmly. These artifacts belong to galactic heritage, not any single alliance. Vorthak's eyes seemed to focus on Marcus with new intensity. Interesting. Most humans would defer to their betters in such matters. You show unusual spirit for your species. After the Hegemony representatives left, Marcus and Zixara sat in uncomfortable silence. The threat had been politely worded but unmistakable. The Hegemony wanted the artifacts and they weren't used to being told no. They know something we don't, Zixara said finally. Marcus nodded, pulling up his research again. The question is what? But I think I'm starting to understand why they're interested. He highlighted several sections of his analysis. Look at the distribution pattern of these symbols. They're not random. They form a network covering most of the galaxy's habitable systems, and the timing of the abandonment coincides with something else. What? The first appearance of the current galactic species in the archaeological record. It's like someone cleared the galaxy and then seeded it with new civilizations. Zixara was quiet for a long moment. You're suggesting the architects didn't just leave. They were preparing the galaxy for us. Maybe. But if that's true, why hide it? And why are the Hegemony so interested in suppressing research about them? The answer came sooner than either of them expected. That evening, as Marcus worked late in the museum, his research computer received an encrypted message from an unknown source. The transmission was brief but chilling. The weak will be cleansed. The strong will inherit what was always ours. The false peace ends tomorrow. Marcus immediately contacted Zixara, but the station's communication system was already being jammed. Emergency alarms began sounding as hostile ships appeared on the sensor screens. The real attack was beginning, and Marcus realized with growing horror that his research had somehow triggered it. The artifact on his desk seemed to pulse with inner light as explosions echoed through the station's corridors. Whatever the Hegemony was really after, Marcus had a feeling he was about to find out. The station shook as another explosion tore through the diplomatic quarters. Marcus could hear weapon fire and screaming echoing through the corridors as he ran toward the command center. The Hegemony fleet had dropped out of hyperspace without warning, launching fighters and boarding pods before anyone could react. He found Zixara in the central security hub, coordinating the defense with grim efficiency. Her tactical display showed red everywhere. Enemy forces had breached the station at multiple points and were advancing toward the reactor core and the main civilian shelters. "How many ships?" Marcus asked, ducking as sparks showered from an overloaded console. 47 vessels, including 3 heavy cruisers. Zixara's mandibles were clenched tight with stress. "They're not here to make a statement. This is a full invasion force." On the main screen, General Vorthak's insectoid face appeared. His compound eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he spoke. "Citizens of Harmony Prime, you have harbored enemies of galactic order. Surrender the architect artifacts and the human called Chen, and your deaths will be swift." Marcus felt ice in his veins. "They're here for me." "They're here for what you found," Zixara corrected. "The question is why those artifacts are worth starting a war over." The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Yalith, an elderly Palathi scholar, stumbled into the command center with blood trickling from a head wound. Her usually pristine feathers were singed and disheveled. "Commander, you must listen to me," she gasped. "The artifacts Dr. Chen has been studying, they're not just historical curiosities. They're keys. Keys to what?" Zixara demanded. "To the architect legacy systems, hidden throughout the galaxy, waiting for the right genetic signature to activate them." Yalith's large eyes fixed on Marcus. "The hegemony has spent decades searching for them. They believe whoever controls the architect technology will rule the galaxy." Marcus stared at her. "That's impossible. Humans have only been in space for 200 years. We have no connection to any ancient civilization, don't we?" Yalith pulled out a data tablet, her clawed fingers shaking as she called up a genetic analysis. "I've been studying human DNA since your species joined the galactic community. There are sequences that don't match any known evolutionary pattern, genes that seem designed rather than naturally selected." The station lurched as enemy forces breached another section. Zixara was forced to divide her attention between the conversation and the tactical display, showing her forces being slowly overwhelmed. "Even if that's true," Marcus said, "it doesn't matter right now. We need to evacuate the civilians." "There is no evacuation," Zixara said grimly. "They've destroyed the docking bays and are jamming our distress signals. We're trapped." On the tactical display, enemy forces were converging on the museum level. Marcus realized with sick certainty that they were coming for the artifacts. And for him. "I have to go back," he said. "If those artifacts are what they want, maybe I can use them as bargaining chips." Zixara grabbed his arm with one of her clawed hands. "You're not going anywhere alone. If they want you that badly, you're too valuable to risk. And if I don't try, everyone on this station dies." They stared at each other for a moment, years of marriage and shared understanding passing between them. Finally, Zixara nodded grimly. "Then we go together." The journey back to the museum was a nightmare of smoke, debris, and running battles. Hegemony soldiers had taken control of most corridors, forcing Marcus and Zixara to crawl through maintenance shafts and emergency passages. When they finally reached the museum level, they could hear enemy forces cutting through the main entrance. Marcus rushed to his workstation while Zixara took position to cover the doorway. The artifact with the strange symbols sat where he had left it, but now it was definitely glowing with soft blue light. "It's reacting to something," Marcus said, picking up the object. The moment his skin touched the metal, the glow intensified and spread to other artifacts throughout the museum. "Marcus," Zixara called urgently, "whatever you're going to do, do it fast." Hegemony soldiers were pouring through the entrance, their weapons trained on the couple. General Vorthak himself followed behind them, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. "Dr. Chen, how good of you to save us the trouble of hunting you down. Please step away from the artifacts." Marcus looked down at the object in his hands. The symbols were now blazing with light, and he could feel something stirring in his mind. Knowledge that wasn't his. Memories of a galaxy that existed before any current species had learned to look at the stars. "I don't think so," Marcus said quietly. Vorthak's expression shifted to annoyance. "You misunderstand your situation, human. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Your wife may be a skilled warrior, but even she cannot fight 40 soldiers." "You're right," Marcus agreed. "She can't." The artifact in his hand suddenly felt warm, then hot, then like it was merging with his very DNA. Pain shot through his nervous system as ancient programming awakened in genes that had been dormant for 50,000 years. Marcus Chen, xenoarchaeologist and husband, stumbled and fell to his knees. What rose in his place was something the galaxy had not seen since the architects walked. Among the stars, the sword mounted on the wall, behind his desk, a simple medieval weapon from Earth that he had inherited from his grandfather, began to sing. It was not a human sound. It was the harmonic frequency of crystalline metal forged in the heart of a star, technology that made the hegemony's weapons look like stone knives. The blade pulled itself free from its mounting and flew across the room to Marcus's outstretched hand. When his fingers closed around the hilt, Marcus's eyes blazed with the same blue light as the artifacts. His awareness expanded beyond the museum, beyond the station, encompassing the entire solar system in perfect tactical clarity. He could see every hegemony ship, every soldier, every weapon, and they could all see him. Impossible, Vorthak whispered, his compound eyes reflecting the terrible light pouring from Marcus's transformed form. Humans are weak. You have no warrior tradition, no natural weapons. Marcus stood slowly, the sword humming with power in his grip. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made the walls vibrate. We were never weak, he said. We were sleeping. The first soldier to fire found his energy bolt absorbed harmlessly by the sword's field. Marcus moved with speed that made Zixara's enhanced reflexes look sluggish, cutting through armor and weapons like they were made of paper. But he wasn't killing. Despite their overwhelming advantage in numbers and firepower, despite their intention to commit genocide, Marcus was carefully disabling rather than destroying. It was precision that spoke of absolute confidence and unshakable moral foundations. In 30 seconds, 40 elite hegemony soldiers lay unconscious or disabled around the museum floor. General Vorthak stood alone, his weapon forgotten in his clawed hands. Now, Marcus said, his glowing eyes fixed on the general. Let's discuss the terms of your surrender. The sword in Marcus's hand pulsed with energy that seemed to bend reality around its edge. General Vorthak backed away, his compound eyes wide with an emotion the Krill rarely showed. Fear. You cannot be architect-born, Vorthak hissed. The hegemony searched every world, every species. We would have found you. Marcus felt knowledge flowing into his mind like water through a broken dam. Memories that weren't his own. Tactical data accumulated over millennia. The true history of the galaxy written in genetic code rather than books. You were looking in the wrong places, Marcus said, his voice still carrying those impossible harmonics. You searched for advanced civilizations, warrior races, beings who looked like conquerors. You never thought to look among the refugees. Through the sword's enhanced awareness, Marcus could sense the hegemony fleet surrounding Harmony Prime. 47 ships with enough firepower to destroy a small moon, all focused on a single space station. But now he could see their weaknesses, the gaps in their formation, the overloaded power systems, the crew rotations that left key positions temporarily undermanned. Refugees from what? Zixara asked. She was staring at her husband with a mixture of awe and concern. The gentle man she had married was still there, but something vast and ancient was looking out through his eyes. From themselves, Marcus replied, fragments of memory coalescing into understanding. The architects weren't destroyed by external enemies. They were victims of their own success. He gestured with his free hand and holographic displays sprang to life around the museum, star charts showing the galaxy as it had been 50,000 years ago. When a single civilization spanned every inhabited world, they built weapons that could reshape stars, ships that traveled between galaxies, artificial intelligences that could predict the future with perfect accuracy. They became so powerful that they forgot what it meant to struggle, to grow, to face real challenges. The displays shifted, showing the gradual decline of architect civilization, not through war or plague, but through stagnation. A perfect society with no room for change, no pressure for evolution. So they made a choice, Marcus continued. They scattered their genetic legacy among primitive species throughout the galaxy, then disappeared into the void. They wanted their children to grow up strong through adversity, to learn wisdom through hardship. Vorthak's mandibles clicked frantically. Lies. The hegemony has ruled through strength for 10,000 years. We are the inheritors of galactic power. You've ruled through fear and oppression, Marcus corrected. That's not strength. That's weakness disguised as power. The sword's energy field expanded, and Marcus could feel it connecting to similar weapons hidden throughout human space. On Earth, in colony worlds, aboard human ships, wherever descendants of the architects had spread, their heritage was awakening. But not all humans carried the genetic markers. The architects had been selective, choosing bloodlines that showed particular traits: curiosity, compassion, the ability to see beyond immediate self-interest. Marcus realized with sudden clarity why he had been drawn to archaeology, why he could read ancient languages that should have been incomprehensible. "The fleet is moving," Zixara reported, watching her tactical displays. "They're positioning for a bombardment run." Marcus nodded, his enhanced awareness already tracking their movements. "They're going to destroy the station rather than let the artifacts fall into the wrong hands. Standard hegemony doctrine. If you can't control something, eliminate it." "Can you stop them?" Zixara asked. Marcus looked at the sword in his hand, feeling the vast potential contained within its crystalline matrix. He could sense the hegemony ship's weapon systems, their computer networks, even the thoughts of their crews. With the right application of force, he could disable the entire fleet without firing a shot. "Yes," he said, "but that's not the real question. What is?" "Whether I should." Forthak seized on his hesitation. "You see, even with architect power, humans remain weak. You lack the will to use your strength decisively." Marcus turned to face the general, and for a moment Vorthak saw something in those glowing eyes that made him take an involuntary step backward. "I lack the desire to repeat my ancestors' mistakes," Marcus said quietly. "They had unlimited power and used it to create a perfect static universe. When they realized their error, billions of years of progress had been lost." The sword's energy field suddenly expanded to encompass the entire station. Through the security monitors, Marcus could see hegemony soldiers throughout Harmony Prime, stopping in their tracks as their weapons became useless. Their armor powered down, their communications went silent. "I'm not going to conquer you," Marcus continued, his voice now broadcasting throughout the hegemony fleet. "I'm not going to rule you or destroy you or force you to submit. I'm going to give you something much more terrifying." "What?" Vorthak whispered. "A choice." The holographic displays shifted again, now showing current galactic politics, the oppressed species suffering under hegemony rule, the resources being stripped from colony worlds, the systematic elimination of cultures deemed weak by hegemony standards. "Look at what you've built," Marcus said. "Look at what you're destroying. Is this the galaxy you want to leave to your children?" For the first time since Marcus had known him, General Vorthak was silent. Around the museum, disabled hegemony soldiers were slowly regaining consciousness, their weapons dark and useless. "The architect weapons are awakening throughout human space," Marcus explained. "Not just the tools of war, but the instruments of creation. Terraforming systems, medical technologies, educational programs that can uplift entire civilizations. We could share all of this freely, and if we refuse?" Vorthak asked. Marcus's expression was sad rather than threatening. "Then you'll continue down the same path until you destroy yourselves, just like dozens of civilizations before you. The choice is yours." Through the sword's connection to the station's systems, Marcus opened communication channels to every world in the galaxy. The Peace Summit had been intended to bring species together through diplomacy. Now it would serve a different purpose. "People of the galaxy," Marcus began, his voice carrying across space to billions of beings. "My name is Marcus Chen. I'm a human, a xenoarchaeologist, and apparently the descendant of beings you knew as the architects. On countless worlds, in stations and ships and colonies, beings stopped what they were doing to listen. The revelation that humans were architect-born would change everything. Trade relations, military alliances, the entire balance of galactic power. I'm broadcasting the coordinates of hidden architect facilities throughout the galaxy." Marcus continued. "Medical technology that can cure any disease, agricultural systems that can feed any population, educational tools that can help any species reach its full potential. All of it is freely available to anyone who wants to build, rather than destroy." Zixara moved to stand beside her husband, her forearms spread in a gesture of protection and support. "And if anyone tries to use these gifts to harm others?" Marcus smiled, and for a moment he looked like the gentle scholar she had married rather than a being with the power to reshape the galaxy. Then they'll have to deal with me, he said simply. The sword's light began to dim, but its power remained constant. Around the galaxy, other humans were discovering their heritage and making their own choices about how to use it. The age of passive humanity was ending, but what would replace it remained to be seen. 3 days after the confrontation at Harmony Prime, the galaxy was still reeling from Marcus's revelation. The hegemony fleet had withdrawn without firing another shot, their commanders too stunned by the display of architect technology to continue their assault. But the real changes were happening far from the diplomatic station. Marcus sat in the station's medical bay, watching as architect healing technology worked to repair Zixara's injuries. The devices looked like nothing more than crystalline panels, but they could diagnose and treat damage at the cellular level. His wife's wounds were already closing, her damaged exoskeleton regenerating with remarkable speed. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked, his voice back to its normal human tones. The sword rested across his knees, its glow dim but not entirely gone. "Like I've been trampled by a herd of Taurian war beasts," Zixara replied, but she was smiling. "The healing process is intense, but effective." Through the medical bay's viewing window, they could see the ongoing evacuation of Harmony Prime. The peace summit had officially ended, but representatives from dozens of species were staying to witness the activation of newly discovered architect facilities. Some came seeking aid, others out of curiosity, and a few with barely concealed fear. Dr. Yeleth entered the medical bay, her feathers now clean and properly groomed. She carried a data tablet filled with reports from across the galaxy. "The response has been mixed," she said diplomatically. 17 species have formally requested access to architect medical technology. 23 want agricultural assistance, but 8 major powers have declared humanity a potential threat to galactic stability. Marcus wasn't surprised. Power never liked to be redistributed, and the revelation that the galaxy's newest and supposedly weakest species actually descended from its ancient rulers had upset every political calculation. "What about the hegemony?" Zixara asked. "General Vorthak has returned to their homeworlds, but he hasn't made any public statements. Our intelligence suggests their leadership is deeply divided. Some want to attack human colonies before more architect weapons can be activated. Others want to negotiate for access to the technology." Marcus stood, the sword moving with him like a natural extension of his body. "They're afraid. They've built their entire civilization on the idea that might makes right, that the strong deserve to rule the weak, learning that humans, the species they considered most expendable, actually have the power to stop them challenges everything they believe." "Will they attack?" Yaleth asked. "Some of them will try," Marcus said. "Fear makes people do stupid things, and the hegemony has never been known for wisdom." The medical scanners chimed, indicating that Zixara's treatment was complete. She stood slowly, testing her newly healed limbs. "So what do we do? Return to Earth and prepare for war?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hand resting on the sword's hilt. Through its connection to other architect weapons, he could sense what was happening throughout human space. On Mars, ancient terraforming systems were bringing dead soil back to life. On the colony world of New Geneva, medical facilities were curing diseases that had plagued local populations for generations. Aboard human trading ships, navigation systems were revealing safer routes through hyperspace. But he could also sense the fear and anger building in response. Hegemony war fleets massing at their borders, independent warlords planning raids on human colonies, species that had once ignored humanity now viewing them as an existential threat. "No," Marcus said finally. "Running away would just confirm their fears. We need to show them what we're really offering, which is..." Marcus pulled up a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas of conflict, yellow showed regions of political instability, and green indicated peaceful, prosperous systems. There was far too much red and yellow. "Partnership," Marcus said. "The architects made the mistake of trying to perfect the galaxy through control. We can help it grow through cooperation." Over the following weeks, Marcus and Zixara traveled throughout the galaxy as unofficial ambassadors of humanity's new role. They visited worlds ravaged by war, demonstrating how architect medical technology could heal both physical and environmental damage. They showed oppressed populations how educational systems could help them develop their own solutions to problems, rather than relying on outside authority. Not every encounter was peaceful. A hegemony strike force attempted to capture Marcus during a relief mission to the plague-stricken world of Kythera. They discovered that the sword's defensive capabilities were as impressive as its offensive power. Energy shields that could deflect capital ship weapons, tactical awareness that let him predict enemy movements hours in advance, and the ability to temporarily disable technology through harmonic resonance. But Marcus's greatest weapon turned out to be restraint. When he could have destroyed the attacking fleet, he instead disabled their weapons and opened communication channels. When he could have humiliated defeated enemies, he offered them medical aid for their wounded. When he could have demanded submission, he asked for dialogue. The galaxy began to realize that humans weren't interested in conquest or revenge. They genuinely wanted to help. The turning point came 6 months after Harmony Prime, when the Zelthari Confederacy formally requested human assistance in dealing with a dying star that threatened to sterilize 3 inhabited systems. Architect stellar engineering technology, tools that could extend a star's life or even prevent it from going supernova, had been considered purely theoretical. Marcus worked alongside Zeltari scientists for 2 weeks, teaching them how to operate systems their ancestors might have helped design. When the star stabilized and began burning with renewed energy, the celebration could be seen from neighboring systems. "This is what we should have been doing all along," Marcus told Zixara as they watched the restored star from the bridge of their ship. "Not ruling or controlling, but building and healing." "The sword agrees with you," Zixara observed. The weapon now rarely glowed at all, its energy conserved for genuine threats rather than displays of power. Marcus nodded. Throughout human space, other descendants of the architects were making similar choices. Some used their heritage to become teachers, sharing knowledge that could uplift entire civilizations. Others became healers, using medical technology to eliminate suffering wherever they found it. A few became guardians, standing watch against those who would abuse power. But none became conquerors. The hegemony's response was predictable. Faced with a power they couldn't match or corrupt, they began to fracture. The more moderate factions opened diplomatic channels with humanity, while the hardliners retreated to their core worlds and spoke of purity and racial destiny. "They'll try again," Zixara warned. "People like Vorthak don't give up easily." "I know," Marcus replied. "But they'll find it harder to justify their actions when people can see the alternative we're offering." A year after the revelation at Harmony Prime, Marcus stood once again in a museum, this one on Earth, displaying artifacts that chronicled humanity's journey from a single world to guardian of the galaxy. Children from dozens of species played in the exhibits, learning about their shared heritage and possibilities for the future. The sword hung on the wall behind his desk, looking like nothing more than an ancient weapon from humanity's medieval period. But sometimes when children asked about it, Marcus would take it down and let them feel the weight of responsibility it represented. "Power isn't about how much damage you can cause," he would tell them. "It's about how much good you can do, and having the wisdom to know the difference." Zixara joined him as the museum closed for the day, her 4 arms folding around him in a gesture that had become natural over their years together. "Any regrets?" she asked. Marcus looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, humans with architect heritage were working to build something better than what came before. It wouldn't be perfect. The galaxy was too vast and complex for perfection. But it could be better. Just one, Marcus said, that it took so long for us to remember who we really are. The sword on the wall pulsed once with soft blue light, as if acknowledging his words. Then it went dark, waiting patiently for the next time the galaxy would need its guardians to step forward and remind everyone that true strength lay not in the power to destroy, but in the courage to protect and nurture what was worth saving.